Hi guys. Okay, so in this next tutorial, what we're going to be looking at is jumping into Photoshop, looking at how we set up our canvas so that it will work as a texture atlas later on in 3D Studio Max. I'll be showing you where I get some of my textures from, but obviously for a degree course it would be highly advisable that you try and get the textures yourself, either through taking your own photographs or editing the ones that you found online. I would rather that you had your own photographs, but that, you know, it isn't commonly used. The industry doesn't go out all the time to get their fresh photographs. They probably take them from various places as well, or pay for them. So the first thing is, how do we set up Photoshop to work as a texture atlas? Now, a texture atlas is essentially all of the textures that you're going to use and duplicate and reuse in your scene, all on one sheet, or on 4 or 5 sheets. So you wouldn't just have a texture of a wall. You would have a texture of a wall and a floor and a window and a whatever, all in one sort of place. So the first thing is, how do we set it up? So all you do is you go to your File, New, and create your first texture atlas, which will be a set size. So for example, I could design one now at 1024 by 1024, and I'm given this. And then I'm just going to, I've got a grey colour already selected here, so I'm just going to fill my scene by pressing Alt and backspace, and that will fill it with the texture, with the colour that I have here. And you can see I've already got my grid lines set up, and this is essentially what you're going to be setting up in a moment. So we know that from here down to there is 1024, so 120. So 1024 pixels straight down to here, and the same across there, which means that one of these squares, each quarter of this bigger square that we can see here, is a 512 texture sheet, which means that each of the individual squares within this bigger square is a 256. Which means that each individual square within this square is a 128. Okay, so you can see where we're going like that with that. So how do we set up this grid? So what you do is you go to your edit at the top here, scroll down until you find preferences, and then go to your guides, grid, and slices. Select that. And then in here we can do a number of things. So the first thing that we can do is we can change the color. So I've set mine to white over here. We can change that to anything that we like. So you can put like a blue if you like. I'll change the color for you. I tend to pick a lightish color because when you've got your textures down on there, a lot of the kind of texture work you're going to be doing, especially if you're doing sort of environments and things like that, then you would more than likely have sort of dark shadows and things like that in there. So if you were to have sort of a darker color on of your grid, it won't show up as well. So I pick something either white or some kind of light, bright color. Okay. So the first thing that I've got here, I've told it to set a grid line. So one of these little lines here, every 256 pixels. Okay, so it knows that from here to there is 1024. Therefore, it knows that each of these blocks is 128, and that it's going to put in one of these solid blue darker lines. As you can see, this one here, and there's one there, and there's one here. Those are where it's putting in every 256 pixels. So make sure this is set to pixels, make sure that's set to 256, and then the subdivisions is 2, and that's so that we can have our 128s on the inside. If we change that to 1, then we just end up with this, and this is, it is easy to see. I mean, you can see that you've got a 512 here, and you've got a 256 there. But if you're going to do any smaller details, then you won't be able to extract those. So just bear with me and understand that having 2 in there is a good thing. Okay, so that's the setup for your grid. the next thing that you're going to want to be doing, start thinking about what sort of buildings and environment you're going to use, and then go and get those textures. So for me, I tend to use a site called cgtextures.com. It has a whole host of textures that you can use. They're all here in a big file. So if you're looking for wheels, and you click on wheels, and there's a load of wheels there. There's fuse boxes, bits of road, sort of signs and barriers, or sort of markings and railings, and all that sort of stuff. So there's loads and loads and loads here. There's individual pieces for signs, and signs in different languages, instructional signs, neon signs. All of that is there. Okay, so there's lots and lots there for you to have a look at and to potentially use. You might not want to use all of them, but you're going to use some of them. That's fine. So here's where I'm going to gather some of my textures from, and I've already done a bit of a show you what I did earlier piece on this one, but I'm going to walk you through the beginning section. So, for example, let's say that I was building a building that had some kind of red brick. So I go, okay, well, I'm going to choose this one, but obviously I want one that's going to tile. So certain textures on here within CG Textures are tiled. So you can see here that this one is tiled, this one is tiled, this one isn't tiled. You can see by the shape of it that it's not going to be tiled. And then it shows you how much, what sizes you can download them at. So this one can be downloaded at 3050 by 3050. Or you can download its smallest size, which is 700 by 700. So we're only looking at something quite small. I mean, if you think about our scene or our document in Photoshop, the whole thing is 1024. So a 700 by 700 is going to take up probably about, you know, this much space. We don't even need it to take up that much. We want it to take up, you know, maybe even just a 512. So let's go back to our CG textures, and let's say, for example, that I want to have a bit of brick, right? When you sign up for CG Textures, you're allowed 15 meg. I think it's per week. You can pay to have more than that, but I think I've already gathered probably about 7 or 8 textures this morning by using this, and you can see I've only used 2 meg. Obviously, the ones that you do download, I'd advise you to save them and put them somewhere where you're going to remember, so you don't have to come and download them again. All right. You can also see it's a 3D tiling view. So here we can see what it actually looks like when it's tiled, and you can tell it to tile more or less times, so that you can see whether the piece that you're going to use is something that you can actually, you know, make use of. So I'm going to download the smallest version of this. So I'm just going to click on where it says small, and then it'll ask me where I want to save it to. So I'm just going to chuck it on the desktop for a second. In fact, I'll make a new folder called test modular. Okay, I'm going to put my brick in there, and then I'm going to come back to my CG textures, and I just want to look for something like I don't know, maybe some windows, or okay, some windows here. Let me see. So we'll go for we don't want broken, do we? Let's go for something a little kind of standard. What's in other? Other might have some interesting ones in here. Okay. So, all right. Well, I could pick something like this, right? So it's only 0.2 meg. It doesn't tile, obviously. So we're just going to quickly download that one, open it in a new folder, and test modular. That's where I'm saving. There's one of my windows. Let's say that maybe I would like a door as well. So let's come back to cgtextures.com. We can go for doors, and we'll go for let's go for a wooden door, panel doors, lovely. Let's see, something's going to go well with my brick. It's probably just a simple little black door like that. Okay, so I'm going to take that one. All right, so obviously you go through and you want to gather all the textures that you can for buildings and the whatever it is that you're going to create. Of course, if you're going to be building something like, you know, the Disney Paris building, then you're going to need to look at lots and lots of reference. You might not be able to gather the actual textures that you need straight off the bat. It might be that you find something that's similar, and then you use your own Photoshop skills to edit those things to make them look a bit more realistic, or like the piece that you're doing. So, okay, in here, first of all, I've got my Photoshop document open. I'm going to go to File and Open, and I'm just going to jump into my modular testing, or testing modular, whatever it was I called it. Can't find it. Here it is. And then I've got these three here. So I'm just going to open all three of them. So 1, 2, 3. They're going to open in separate documents for me up here. The first thing I want to do is I want to grab my red brick, and I'm simply just going to select it and drag it from its file. So I'm going to click and drag, hover over my untitled 01 and drop it in. And here we can see that I've got my brick in there. The other way of copying it, if that doesn't work for you, is just to use the rectangular marquee tool here, press Control A, it will select everything that's in that scene, Control C to copy, and then you can come into your untitled one and Control V, and it will paste it in for you. So you can see I've got two of them in there now. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of one of them just by dragging it into the bin just like that. And now with this one, I want it to take up just one 512 section of my sheet. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is zoom in a little closer so that I can see where that 512 actually is, which is kind of, well, I've lost it now actually. Where is it? There it is, that line there. So this corner just here. So if I go and press Control and T, it allows me to transform or free transform the texture. So holding down Shift whilst I do this means that I'll keep its size throughout. I'm just going to make it ever so slightly bigger than it needs to be. You can see I'm overlapping slightly there, and that's because what I want to do is just come in nice and close and make sure that I get this to fit the boundaries as I'm scaling it. So again, Control T, holding down Shift, and then I just want to make sure it fits right inside that 512 by 512 space. So there's my first piece of texture created and placed. I can then go to my door, for example, and I know that I don't want all of that kind of frame around the outside. I literally just want the door, so I'm just going to select what I think is most of the door there. Control C to copy it, come into my untitled one, Control V, I can paste it. And then again, I want to set this door so that it's right inside one of these boundaries. So 512 tall would be to here, and then 256 wide would be to there. So our door should fit within this these 8 little blocks just here. Okay, so I'm going to shift it and make sure that the bottom corner kind of lies up where I want it to, and then Control T and holding down Shift, I can resize it. So we can see that our door isn't actually the right size, it's slightly too thin. So what I'm going to do here, and it's something that you can kind of get away with stretching things a little bit. To me, that circle there looks a little oblong anyway, so if I stretch it out by this much, it might not make a huge amount of difference. This might totally ruin the door. The other thing that I want to make sure is that my edges are looking clean. So if I Control and H on the keyboard, it will hide the guides that we've got on there. I can just press Control and H again to bring them back. But I can see now if I go Control T again on my door, I actually want my door to be sort of this wide. Bearing in mind that I'm going to cut off this little bit of white here. So that's my door kind of sat squat inside the area that I wanted to give it. I'm just going to make it ever so slightly longer so there isn't that sort of change in texture just here. If you can see that difference there, I'm just going to make the door ever so slightly bigger in that direction as well. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And then what I want to do is just cut off this piece on the edge. So I'm just going to use my rectangular marquee, or you can press M on the keyboard, and then Control, without pressing any buttons on the keyboard, just click and drag, and you'll be able to remove those bits that are lining up next to your guides. Okay, Control and D is used to deactivate whenever you use a rectangular marquee. So if you're using something, one of these, Control D will deselect those. So you can see at the moment now I've got my door. It's ever so slightly squat compared to what an actual door would probably look like, but things do look okay. I've got my wall section in there as well. And then the only other thing that we copied was this window. So again, I'm just going to click and drag around the piece that I actually want, which is this much. I do want the frame in there as well. I think that'd be quite useful to use. So I'm going to come around to about here, and again, Control C to copy, and then in Entitled, Control V to paste it, and then Control T. Holding down Shift will allow me to resize. So again, I want to resize so that I'm using the width of something, such as this piece here. So I'm using the sides. And then the other thing that I want to do is my window is fine, but it wouldn't just kind of sit. So if you look at this right here now, so you've got, let me just get rid of the guides. So you've got this wall, and then you've got a window just kind of sat on top of it. That doesn't happen. I don't need to teach you guys how to build houses, but you know that your windows and your doors are built within the holes in the walls, right? Okay, so with knowing that and having that as, you know, something that we understand as human beings, that things have to be built within, what I'm going to do is to shift this over to one side. I'm going to grab my actual wall that I've created earlier. And then I'm going to hold down Alt whilst I move the wall up. Okay, so I can see that I'm hovering over the top of it. I'm not pressing anything so far. If I hold down Alt now, you can see my icon changes to a black and a white triangle, one on top of the other. That means I'm going to make a copy. And then I can click and drag and make an absolute duplicate of that wall and place it in the top half of my texture atlas. So I can do a couple of things here now with this piece of wall. This piece of wall is going to be not my bare wall. This is my bare wall down here, this bottom right hand corner. This top piece of wall, this is the one that's going to have a bit more details on it. So I can now grab my window. I've got a bit of blue looking through this window at the moment, so I'm going to have to change that in a second. But you can see here now that I can just hold down Control and T again, resize, and then Shift drag, and I can sort of make this look like it's kind of inset slightly into the wall, so I can reposition it so that it's kind of sat where I want it on this wall. Okay, and I'm probably just gonna, I want that bottom bit of brick to show, so I'm just going to resize it ever so slightly so you can see that line of white. Okay, so there's my window is built into my wall. If I put my grids back on, you can see that this is using right up against the bottom line of my 512 by 512 is using the middle line there. So perhaps I don't want it to do that because maybe I want to make use of this bottom bit of wall. Maybe I don't. Maybe the bottom bit of the wall is going to be blank and the top bit has the window in it. One way or the other, you can make those decisions. You can decide how this works. So you can see here that the process is simply gather the textures that you want, place them where you want them within your texture atlas, and then we move from there into 3D Studio Max. So this is all well and good. I'm just going to save this one where it is, but I'm going to show you one that I created earlier, and we're going to carry on working from there. Okay, so I'll just quickly save this one as test brick, and then I'm just going to close down these files that we have here, and I'm going to reopen my test piece that I was doing earlier. Okay, so in here you can see that I've got a few things going on. So I've got my bare bit of wall like we did with the brick one, the red brick. I've got my bare bit of wall at the top here again, but I've managed to slice in this this garage piece here. Okay, so there's like a little garage on the inside. I've got a section here for windows. I've got a section here for some concrete pillar that we might use at some point later on. I've got another set of windows, so I've taken 1/4 of this bare wall that I know tiles, and then I've placed another window within it. I've got a broken set of windows here that haven't been set within a piece of wall yet. They probably should be. And then I've got a piece of old sort of graffiti doorway. And then I've got this section here, like a little vent that I've created there. So this is my texture atlas. I haven't used this space up here just yet. I haven't really used this window appropriately yet either. This window hasn't been sat on side any kind of piece of wall either. What I did do, and I can show you that now, is I have already started creating test piece number 2, which is exactly the same, yet I've started to use, I've put my window inside my wall. So there, I've got 2 pieces here, 2 PSDs. The first one looks like this, and the second one looks like this. Now they're identical other than this piece, and that's just me being lazy. I haven't done anything else to any of them. But just to show that you can have more than one texture atlas, and you can use more than one texture atlas in one scene. So that is it for the Photoshop side of things. So you set it all up, you make sure that you're lining up to your grid lines, and make sure that you're always doing things to the power of 2. So when I jump into 3D Studio Max now, I'm going to close down Photoshop and just boot up what I've done in 3D Studio Max up until now. Just minimize that, and I'll open up my test piece. Okay, so once this loads up, you can see here's my images that I took from. These are also from CG Textures, so just metal doors and bits of concrete and large blocks and all that sort of stuff. So they're all the same way that I just showed you with your red brick. Exactly the same things happening here with the one that I've just created. So here's what we've got, and this is what I've managed to put together so far. So you can see here that I've got these kind of Lego block pieces that I can start moving, manipulating, and putting wherever I want them to. So I've got my big old square bit of, let me just turn off my snaps and things. I've got my big old square piece here that can now be snapped to anywhere that I want to. I've got a separate door piece here that hasn't got any depth to it at all at the moment. I've got this piece up here, which does have some depth to it. So if we just isolate that for a second for you to see, you can see that I've got like a nice inset running on the inside there. This piece is kind of set back. Got a bit of ambient shadow running over the top of it. All looks hunky-dory and nice. And then we've got the garage piece over here as well that you can see has kind of got this nice shadowy set-inness next to the brick. So the piece that that I haven't worked on yet is to add in that the bit of wall that has the windows put into it. Okay, so I'm going to show you that next piece. So how do I get my texture atlas to start working within 3D Studio Max, and how do I start using it? Well, it's really simple. The first thing that you do, I'm just going to, in fact, I'm just going to hide all of this, and we'll come back to that in a second. And let's just get back onto our grid again. So what I'm going to do is going to go into my geometry, or what you're going to do is go into your geometry, come down to plane, make sure you've got square turned on, and then just very quickly you can press S to turn snaps on, right click your snaps toggle and make sure that you're snapping to grid points as well as vertex. And that way we can snap right to the middle of the grid and just quickly draw. Okay, I'm not interested in the size or anything that I'm drawing at the moment because I'm going to rechange that right now. So where I've got my length and my width, I'm going to change that to 512 on both of them. And then the other thing that I want to make sure that I'm doing here is that my unit setup for my world, for my grid, for everything is set how I want it to. Now, the only thing that I need to really change is I need to go into my custom setup at the top here, and then make sure inside there that my unit setup is set to generic units. Okay, a lot of the time you'll have it set to metric because you want it to be like millimeters or centimeters or whatever if you're working on something that requires a certain set of size. But for this, we're just going to use generic units. It's the easiest way of doing it. So make sure generic units is turned on and okay that. And then we can see here with my original, my 512 piece that I've got in here, my length segments and my width segments, I'm going to change those to 8 on both. What that will do is when I import my texture, they should sit exactly how they were in Photoshop. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go to my texture. This is my PSD number 2, so you know how to import a texture. I'll just re-import it for you now. So you come onto one of your spheres, under diffuse, you want to click on the little box there, click on bitmap, and then import the new texture that you've just created. So for me, that means that I need to go to my modular, and I'm going to import my test number 2, which has my window in that bottom corner of wall. So that's the new piece that I want to add to this scene. So I can OK that, drag and drop that straight on, and then I can click on show shaded material in the viewport, and then we'll be able to instantly see how things are looking. So that's dropped in. And now if I look, just as I said before, so my light's having a bit of an effect on the scene at the moment. So I'm just going to change my realistic to shaded just so we can see what's going on. So you can see here that the edges are lining up exactly with where I want them to. Look at the door, for example. So the door can just be taken and sliced straight out of this texture map. So using this now, I'm going to use this window section, and we're going to do a little bit of tweaking on the window, and I'm going to show you how you can get this to look much nicer. Okay. So right click your new scene that has your texture on, convert it to an editable poly, and then we can go in with our polygon selection tool, and looking at it from the top viewport just like this, I can select everything that is part of that bit of wall. And notice how obviously it all lines up perfectly for me. So with that piece selected, I can come down here and I can choose to detach, okay? And this is going to be my wall. So let's call it wall underscore window, okay? That's my new piece there. I'm going to turn off editable poly, and then I'm just going to hit delete just to remove that other stuff that we're not going to use in this scene. I only really want to be using this one. So at the moment, we're still sat on, we're looking at it kind of top down. So I'm just going to stand this wall up. So I'm going to go to my rotation tools, and then I'm just going to use my rotate and rotate it by 90 degrees. Now I haven't got angle snap turned on, so I'm going to Control Z, make sure that angle snap is turned on. And now when I rotate it, I can make sure I get to 90 nice and quickly. Okay. So here's my piece of geometry that at the moment is completely flat. It doesn't resemble a wall in any way whatsoever. But we're going to very quickly change that. And now this is the beauty of using these texture atlases. So with it being an editable poly, first thing I want to do is remove all of these extra lines that are running through it, because obviously we want to save on polygons. We're always wanting to save on polygons. Okay, so I'm going to select each of these edges that are running downwards and each of the edges that are running sideways across this entire map. Click on the loop tool and then hold down Control and click on remove, and there they go. Next, we're going to add a bit of depth to this scene. So with it all selected, I'm going to come to my extrude, and again I'm going to make sure I extrude by a power of 2. So by that I mean I'm going to either extrude it by 32 or by 16 or by 8 or by 4 or by 2. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, power of 2. So I'm going to change it by 16. I'm going to make it jut out by 16. And there we can see we've got some depth now. Obviously the texture isn't working on the sides and the top, but that's because we haven't UV'd it to know where to go yet. But so far so good, trust me. Then what I want to do is use my cap tool. So I'm going to use the border selection there, select one edge of it, and you can see how it rings around in red. It takes up the whole of that, and then just click on the cap button here, and there we can see we've got a window on the back and a window on the front. Okay, so it just mirrors it. Okay, you don't have to cap. Obviously, if you're going to be building stuff and you're not going to see that inside area, then you can just remove it. Okay, so then the next thing I want to do is I want to put in some edges so that we can actually have the window kind of stick out or bevel in a little bit. So using my edge select, I'm going to look at it from a front viewport because I want to make sure that I line this up beautifully. And I'm going to quickly draw a marquee from the bottom, from the top to the bottom. And what that's done is it's selected each of the lines on the top, one at the top and one at the bottom, and highlighted them red. So then I want to just select the connect tool over here. So the little settings box, I'm going to hit that, and that adds me in a connect straight through the middle. What I then want to do is make sure that I have more than one. So I actually want 2 connects, and then I can kind of mess around with these tools here just to make sure that it reaches where I want it to. So I've got it to kind of sit right on the edges. This is why I'm looking at it in the front viewport, because it's easier to see. It's sitting right on the edges of my window frame, which is perfect. Then I want to do exactly the same thing, but I want to do it in the opposite direction. Now, one thing that I've forgotten to tell you, and I've just remembered just now, I've been very lucky with the first cuts that I've just put in there. It hasn't edited the texture whatsoever. But sometimes when you are kind of adding in all of these details, it can ruin the actual mesh for you, or sorry, the texture. To avoid that, make sure that you come down and you click on this Preserve UVs button here. What that will do is that each of the little extra cuts that you're going to put into your scene, this Preserve UVs will stop it from destroying the texture for you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use Edge, and I'm going to draw across the opposite direction. So the first time we went from top to bottom, this time we're going from left to right. And I'm going to use my Connect tool again, and you can see that it's put my first line in pretty much where I want it to, but the bottom one's all the way down here. Okay, so again, it's kind of a mess around with these. We just get them to kind of shrink together a little more, and then we can use the Move tool here just to position it so it's in the right place, and then resize again and reposition, and eventually you'll get it where you want it to. So whilst I just play around getting this just about right, okay, we're fairly close there. So I'm going to stop there and OK it. Now, this bottom line here, which isn't quite where I want it to, because I've got Preserve UVs turned on, it should allow me to move that line around the scene without it affecting the texture. Okay, so I don't want it to be moving by anything in particular. So I'm just going to turn off any of my snap tools up there so that I can move it perfectly into position. Okay, so with that done, what I next want to do is bevel this bit of window inside so that we've got brick and then we've got window. And then you could go to the to detail of taking individual pieces. So you could say, right, well, I want that bit of window frame there to stick out more than I want the inside bits of window frame. So that's up to you. If you want to go in there and add all of those details in, then you can. Just be very aware that you need that Preserve UVs turned on, otherwise things start to go a little bit pear-shaped. All right, so at the minute we've still just got a standard wall. I'm looking at it in a weird perspective. We've just got a standard wall. It's completely flat, so we want to bevel these windows in a little bit. So I'm just going to select that inside section, which is my windows, and I'm going to choose Extrude. And instead of extruding it out by 16, I'm going to extrude it in -8. So I'm still keeping to the power of 2. And then we've got a window frame insetted into our brick wall. Okay. So like I said, you could go in there now and start kind of editing these inside pieces. What you could do, in fact, is to select this piece in the middle and say, well, actually, this is a separate mesh. So perhaps you're going to say, okay, so I'm going to detach that. I'm going to say this is my window, right? So now what you've got, and again, this is all working beautifully with our modular design, is that we've got a piece of wall that could have any number of different types of window in it. Okay, so as long as your windows are all the same size, which they're going to be because you're taking them from your texture atlas, which is mapped to grid lines and spaces, so you're always going to be taking various textures out at the right sizes. But it means that we can put any number of different windows. So we could have windows that are broken, windows that aren't broken, windows that have got little vents in them, windows that have got air conditioning units attached to them. All of that can be very quickly redesigned, and all it is a texture, and you can just drop it straight in, right? That's an explanation of how easy that is to do. But yeah, what we could do here is with this piece over here, we could decide, well, actually, if I keep my Preserve UVs turned on, and I go in there and I can say, right, well, actually, I want to put in some extra detail in this. So I want to start adding in let's just centralize all of these. I want to perhaps, have the tops and the bottoms stick out a little more than they currently do. So, okay to that. I'm going to select down here, use my Connect tool again, and this time we want to kind of bevel it out so it's roughly touching the edges. It's kind of there is where we need to go. Okay. And then you could always put in extra edges running through the center. So let's put in another 2 edges here. I'm just going to bring them into the middle and OK them, because what I actually want to do is move those myself. So I'm going to select one of these edges, hit loop, and then just slide it across so it's where I want it to be. In fact, all I'm going to do is the middle one, just to give you an idea of what you could do here. And then I'm going to select that one again, loop, and shift it across. Okay, so here what I can do now is I can say, right, well, all of this section here is actually much more kind of sticky outy than the central piece, right? So I've got that piece there. I can then go to my extrude tool again, and obviously I'm not going to extrude by minus. I want to positively extrude it. So I'm going to extrude it by another power of 2, so by 4. Okay. And there we've got an even more sort of detailed set of window. And if we have if our lighting kind of kicks in, so we go back to our realistic view and allow the shadows to come in, you can see that we've got something that resembles a window a bit more clearly. Okay, so I know that the thing that you're asking yourselves now is, well, this is all well and good, Mike, but when I've built my separate bits of windows and my separate bits of doors and whatever, how do I go about the problem of these textures being stretched on the sides of everything? Well, let's attack that now. So if I grab this piece here, and I'm going to go into my modify list and add a UV unwrap texture to it. Okay, the first thing that I want to do is sort out these stretched sides that I've got to this brick wall here. So I'm going to choose my polygon select and select each of these sections that I know I need to change. So this one, this one, and this one. Again, I'm just going to turn off my my realistic view because it does make things a little harder for you guys to see. So I'll just turn that off. Okay, so I've selected both sides of this. And then I'm just going to click on my quick planar. I'm going to make sure that I can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to change my checkered pattern within my open UV editor. So within that, sorry, I do jump ahead quite quickly. Inside the edit UVs, I can turn my checker pattern to test number 2, which shows me my texture sheet that I've been working from. And then I can hit on my quick planar, and we can see here is the new pieces that I'm ripping off. Now, those new pieces, all they simply need to do is, if I just hold down, I think it's shift whilst I change it. I can change it in its height, so I can level it out so that it roughly fits into the right place. And again, you kind of want to be looking at what you're doing here in the viewport as well as inside the UV editor. And then what I want to do is just scale that in so that it's just using the area that I want it to. So I just want it to cover this little piece at the bottom corner there. And I'm just kind of eyeballing, making sure that these lines all match up. If they match up on one side, they should match up on the other side, which they do, which is great. And then again, you want to do the same thing for the top and the bottom. So I'm going to select these pieces here. These might look like they're scaled correctly, but they're not at all at the moment. So I'm going to select that top section there. We're never going to see the bottom, but I'll select the bottom bit as well. Now, if I do my quick planar, you can see I'm going to hit a problem, and the problem is this yellow box here isn't facing in the right direction. So it should be this way, right? Instead of being this way. To change that here, something that I don't think you've been taught yet. When you're aligning this thing here, you want to align it sometimes yourself. Max doesn't always do the best job of it. So, for example, I've selected these planes on the top and on the bottom of this wall, and 3ds Max should really know that I want to texture them, you know, looking down on them, not looking at the side of them. So, to change that, we just come into this option here, just click and hold, and then I'm obviously going to want to change them onto the Z axis so that I'm looking down on them. Then when I hit my quick planar, they'll come out the right shape and size for me. So again, with these, what I'm looking at doing is kind of getting them to fit across this top section just there, okay? Because that's the top section that it's mimicking. So again, I'm just going to grab my shift and drag and kind of scale those in, move them across. I want them to be lined up roughly where they are, like so. And then I'm going to shift and drag that down as well. And then again, make sure that you're checking to see whether things are lining up. That's pretty close. I think we're ever so slight. We're probably a pixel off or something somewhere. I'm not going to mess around and move that tiny amount. And then you just continue doing that. So this inside section here and this inside section there, for example, those two need to be taken off. Again, I'm going to need to change the direction in which on my quick planar is working. So for this, it's going to be X. And then I'm going to hit on the quick planar button. And then here's my new pieces here. And again, I can just shift, drag to bring that down to roughly the same height. And then shift, drag it in so that it's using up the same space. Again, you can come in and just check to see whether you're using up the same amount of space as it was previously, which it isn't, because we can see they're actually only taking half of the wall. So I need to shift and drag this one up so it takes up only half of the wall as well. So we're looking at roughly that. So again, I am kind of eyeballing this to make sure that things are roughly sitting where they should. So it's something like that, okay? And if we zoom in, we can just see that we are kind of clipping into a bit of this wall here. So if I hold down shift and drag the whole piece over to the left, and then I can shift and drag the one inside end in a little bit. And that's that side and that side of the wall done. So you can see that we've done a good job on those. And then finally, we've got tops and bottoms of the inside of our wall here. Again, we're going to need to change the direction of our quick planar to Z. And here we are. Here's our piece that we're going to resize. So it's quite simple. I think you guys will find it easy. When you start doing it, you'll find it easier to actually do it. So let me just line this one up. Okay, again, eyeballing it. I haven't really looked over here. Yeah, I've done a nice job on that, on the top and on the bottom. Okay, perfect. So that's that piece done. So I can turn off my unwrap, turn that off as well. And there's my piece of wall, perfectly ready to be copied, duplicated, placed everywhere in the map. And I've also got a little window here that I can replace as well. Now, the next thing is that when you've created all of these individual pieces, so you've created your doors, your walls, your windows, your grates, your whatever it is that you're going to create, make sure that you're documenting all of this and you're showing how you've done it and how that you've managed to create everything in a modular workflow. The next thing is you need to make sure that your pivot points are in the right places. So for example, with this piece here, I can see that the pivot point is up in the top corner. Now, most of the time, people will put their pivot points in bottom corners of things, okay? So I'm going to put it down in this bottom corner down here. And the way in which I'm going to do that is I'm going to turn on my, my snaps, right-click my snaps and turn off grid points because I don't want to snap to the grid. I only want to snap to vertices. Then, up here in my hierarchy, I can choose to affect the pivot. So the pivot of the thing that I have selected. So I've got the wall selected at the moment, which means I'm going to affect the pivot of the wall. And then I use my move tool, and I want to, from the front view, just bring that down and snap it here. And that's done it perfectly in one go. So sometimes it won't, sometimes it'll probably snap to the front one. So just make sure that you grab it and snap it to the further one at the back. Okay. Same goes for the window. So I can turn off affect pivot, select the window. You can see that the pivot for the window is over here. It's not even attached to the window. And I'm just going to affect pivot only, and then I'm going to drag that down so that it's in the right place, and across so it's in the right place, and then Y so it's in the right place. Okay. I haven't done all of the insides on the window, so you can see that we have got some stretching on the insides and we've got some weird horribleness going on there. I've shown you how to change that and how to improve that. So it's exactly the same technique for the window as it was for the walls. So what this means now is that I can grab this piece and I can snap it to the inside of my building. So you can see there that I've just snapped it right onto that back point. And there we go, we've got a wall with a window built inside it. So if we bring back our realistic view for one, and then I'm also going to bring back the rest of our scene by unhiding all. And then here, what we're going to do, you can see all of my other bits of texture. It's Atlas here, look. So I know that I don't need these pieces anymore, so I can delete that, and I can delete that as well. It's unnecessary to have them in the scene. And then I've also got a extra piece of wall here that I didn't want. So I can just delete that piece of wall. And I've got my new bit of wall right here. So two things that we might want to kind of edit about this is that the window is still currently like separate. It's a separate piece. So we can see that if we just grab that and shift it out of the way, and grab our wall and shift it out of the way. So imagine you're kind of knocking all of this together now, and you're sat inside Unity or something similar. You're going to be able to grab these individual pieces, and in Unity, I believe you hold down V, and then you can snap to vertices. With this, all I need to do is drag and move around, so I can snap these pieces. You can see if I get close to a vert, so I'm kind of moving towards the vert in the corner of that door, and the wall just snaps into place. Now, because everything's been designed that way, because back when we did the work in Photoshop, everything was snapped to grid lines, all of this is just going to snap together perfectly. And it means that you can create something in half the time that you would normally take you to create something. If you had to build all of this in one go, you probably would be able to build it nice and quickly, but you wouldn't have pieces that were perfectly aligned to be snapped together and resized and reshaped and all of that sort of stuff. So again, here I'm just going to grab this piece here, and I can just snap it inside that window frame, and then there we go. So now in quite short succession, really, I've managed to create this little scene which has indented windows and garage doors and doorways and all that sort of stuff. And I know that I can reproduce this super quick. I know that I can swap out different windows. I know I can swap out different doors. I know I can swap out whatever I want, because it's all the same size and it's all modularly built, and it's all using a texture atlas. Okay, so that's how we do it. I hope that all makes sense. So your job is to pick an environment that you would like to build, and to modularly build that environment using these techniques, and then to submit that by the deadline day. I'll just give you a quick look at one that Kieran, we spoke about Kieran at the very beginning. I showed you one of his breakdowns of his modular designs. I've got his modular pieces here that I can show you. I'll just make a quick save of that. So this is the one that Kieran worked on before. Here it is. So Kieran's modular pieces here are the ones that you can see. So you can see that there's certain pieces that are very, very simple. So for example, these walls, these plain walls that just have you know, slight indentations in them. There's no inside window section to this piece at all. You've got some of his walls that have these extra little coves hanging on the top of them. He's got a set of walls that have these different typed pieces on the top of them as well. And then you've got walls that have windows built inside them. You've got the walls that have the windows and these extra little details on the top there, and your little sections at the bottom. Then he goes a little bit more detailed, and he starts looking at, well, actually, you can create some sort of balconies by using, he's just using alphas here, by the way. In fact, I'll show you how those alphas are working. Let's see, so it's these ones here. So if I just drop off the opacity map on that, there you can see the actual texture. And we can flip that around so I can show you what it looks like just as an alpha. So there's your opacity on its own. In fact, it doesn't quite work, does it? But that's what he built. Okay, so it's all made out of planes. It's all really simple. Like even these sections here, they're just a plane with some detail on them that with an opacity map turned on, it hides that for you. So then Kieran's gone ahead and he's put in some that have individual windows in. So here's where we can see, you know, how we built that one window on my one. Well, here's his window, okay? And that is literally just ripped from the texture atlas. So if we come in and have a look at Kieran's sheet for just texture atlas, view that. Here you can see that this window here is just using this piece here, right? And it's just placed on there. And the same goes for, he's got these different window looks that he can use and chop and change and move around his entire scene. And again, everything is just snapped into place. So there's no kind of you know, real hard work and messing around and having to build 7 or 8 different types of windows and doors and all that sort of stuff. You just build one, and then you use different textures to make it look like it's a different window or door. Looking at his most complicated piece, and this is where we're talking about, you know, you probably do want a couple of show pieces in there, pieces that, I'm just going to isolate this piece for you so you can see it in more detail. So this piece here, obviously it's got steps to it, it's got the pillars and it's got all of that sort of stuff there, but it's all still using a texture atlas. So these pillars have just been unwrapped and then placed on the texture atlas. In fact, probably the easiest way to talk about this is to show you the the actual textures that it's using. So if we come into our unwrap, I think Kieran's probably got a whole host of unwraps placed on this scene. So texture sheet number 2, we can see he's not using any of texture. Well, he's actually using the door frame from texture sheet number 2. So same as I had 2 PSDs, he's using 2 or 3, I think. So his doorway here, you can see, is using that one texture sheet. So if we just grab, there we go. So you can see now what bit's using what. So that's using this section here. And then if we grab, these are the sections there. So he's got the piece, this whole top piece there. That's obviously not using this texture sheet. So it's probably using texture sheet number 1. Which isn't on here at the moment, I don't think. There's his walls texture, so you can see that this piece here is using the walls texture sheet. We've got a normal map that I think he's using in there for something. Can't see texture sheet number 1, unfortunately, so it's hard for us to see where he's taking that detail from for everything else. I will tell you that this section here, you can see there's little, I don't know if you can actually, you can see these little curved areas here. They're actually the pillars. So if you can imagine this section here wrapped around the pillar like that, that's where he's getting his texture for that. So again, but it's all just sat on a texture sheet. You can see that it's all using this one texture sheet. Now the games of old, all the sort of Mafia on PlayStation 3 and all that sort of stuff, they all use texture sheets like this because their environments are so big that they can't afford to have different textures for different buildings. Like they have to use texture sheets across the board. Now, one thing that I'd like to show you now that we've just kind of gone through all of that and you understand how to use it, just to give you an idea as to how much these texture sheets are being used in modern games, even in the games that you guys are used to playing at the moment. I just want to show you something from Assassin's Creed. So if I come to the go to my drive, just bear with me a second. Breakdowns. So this is the PDF that I wanted to show. So if I just scan through, I think I've got a link to the actual video. Hopefully this plays nicely. Okay. So I'll remove the sound. So this is a breakdown of Assassin's Creed. Now we're looking here at the textures that they use within Assassin's Creed. So what you're going to see popping up in the top left-hand corner for a lot of the time is the texture sheets that are being used within the game. So here you can see they've got it on a PC, obviously, and they've kind of they're breaking it down so they can start looking at it. So there's all the doors. Notice how they're all just sat on one texture sheet. And what you'll notice as we go through this video, and I'm not going to play it all, but I'll give you the link so you can watch it yourselves, is anything that's highlighted in green is using one of those textures that you can see currently on the screen. Okay, so there you can see the doors over there are using the same texture sheet. Those doors there, those doors there, those doors there. They're all pulling from the same texture sheet. Okay. Now that might not look like a lot, but as you start going along, you start looking at other things that are used. So here, for example, if we just pause this for just a second, this one sheet is a 512 by 128 texture. Obviously, it's probably part of the bigger texture atlas, but that piece is being used all the way across various parts, twisted, turned, rotated, and it's being used everywhere in the game. And it's quite surprising how much a certain texture is duplicated when you're playing these types of games. And you guys are running around thinking, wow, this must have taken ages to make this. And it did, of course it did, but it didn't take them half the amount of time that you might think it would if they were building it all as individual pieces. Now, one thing that is massively surprising about Assassin's Creed, and the first time I saw this, I was amazed, wood. Where they use wood in the game. So here, this is quite impressive as well. So these are just these little brick, stone areas, you can see that they're being used like everywhere, and it's just this piece. We're only watching this texture sheet. We're not looking at anything else. And you can see it being tiled along. You can almost see the cuts where the actual geometry has been created. But yeah, so the one I wanted to show you, and then I'll stop this video so that you can crack on, is wood. So if we go to the wood texture here, so this is the wooden plank texture that they're using in this section here. It's a 512 by 512 texture sheet. This is for Assassin's Creed 2, I believe. So you can see where the wood's being used, and it's pretty much everywhere. Any piece of wood that you can see inside Assassin's Creed is all using like this one sheet here. So we can see as he climbs up, certain bits of the building have wood on them. Just fight that guy. And then we're looking at it from a higher viewpoint. You can see all the bits in green are actually using wood, right? They're using that same 512 by 512 texture map. And there's a section in a minute, I think, we jumps into a jetty, and he looks up, and the amount of wood, I mean, here we just come back here, look, so we've got all these kind of sections here. They're all using that one texture, guys. They're not using like 5 or 6 different wood textures. They're just using that one wood texture. The whole of this horse and cart thing, the whole thing, including the wheels, are using this one texture sheet, right? It's mad. And then yeah, so later on he jumps into the water, and you can see like this, all of this is just all using that one texture sheet. And you would never think when you're playing that game that much of the world is being using just one 512 sheet. Okay, so that concludes this video. I hope that was really helpful to you, and I hope it's going to be helpful to you when you're building your environments for the project that you're working on, when you're working in your game, or for this particular module that we're working on now. Okay, so I hope that's helpful, and hopefully I'll speak to you all very soon for the next one.